A profound tremor has been sent through the heavy metal world today with the news that legendary guitarist and vocalist Dave Mustaine, the founder of Megadeth, has been sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This verdict brings the extraordinary, nearly 4-decade-long career of a man who played a pivotal role in defining thrash metal to a tragic and utterly unexpected conclusion. According to veteran music journalist Michael Rodriguez, who has chronicled Mustaine's trajectory from its inception, this represents not merely the dissolution of Megadeth but the final, damning chapter in one of metal's most tumultuous and influential narratives. What is truly staggering is not only the severity of the sentence but the breathtaking velocity with which his world disintegrated once the investigation commenced. This shocking revelation arrives at a moment when Mustaine was experiencing a significant career resurgence, propelled by Megadeth's Grammy win for their 2016 album Dystopia and the critical acclaim for their most recent work, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. Sources close to the band confirm their impending world tour has been abruptly cancelled, triggering the refund of millions in ticket sales. The music industry is reeling from the conviction, facing a devastating financial impact, as revealed by an anonymous senior executive at Universal Music. Yet, the human cost is immeasurably greater. Band members, road crews, and venue staff across the globe are suddenly without employment, not to mention the victims whose courageous testimony ultimately secured justice. For those unacquainted with the case that has dominated metal news outlets for months, Dave Mustaine's downfall originated with what initially seemed a routine inquiry into financial irregularities. However, as authorities delved deeper, they uncovered a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior spanning several decades, all meticulously concealed behind the volatile, rebellious persona his fans had come to expect from the metal icon. To fully comprehend the gravity of his crimes, one must first recall his extraordinary journey within heavy metal. Following his infamous dismissal from Metallica in 1983 due to substance abuse issues, Mustaine formed Megadeth with a vengeful determination to surpass and outshine his former bandmates. Dave turned rejection into rocket fuel, stated former Megadeth drummer Chuck Beeler, noting that driven by a need to prove Metallica wrong, Mustaine channeled that perpetual chip on his shoulder into creating some of the most technically impressive thrash metal ever recorded. Through landmark albums like Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? And Rust in Peace, Dave Mustaine solidified his reputation as one of metal's most distinctive guitarists and songwriters. His snarling vocals, politically charged lyrics, and blistering guitar work propelled Megadeth to amass a devoted global following, with sales exceeding 38 million records worldwide. Despite public battles with addiction and a string of controversies ignited by his inflammatory statements, Mustaine maintained his status as a metal icon. His career, however, was perpetually marked by constant lineup changes, with over 20 musicians cycling through Megadeth's ranks, a fact critics would later point to as evidence of his controlling and volatile nature. Notwithstanding these challenges, Mustaine eventually achieved sobriety and even overcame a cancer diagnosis in 2019. His story was often framed as one of redemption, notes music journalist Michael Rodriguez, a narrative of overcoming personal demons, finding religion, and maturing into an elder statesman of metal. This conviction has irrevocably shattered that carefully constructed image. The investigation into Mustaine began in 2021 when a former Megadeth road crew member came forward with alarming allegations of financial exploitation and abusive behavior. Initially, the complaints centered on unpaid wages and hazardous working conditions, but as the probe progressed, it revealed a far more sinister picture. Lead prosecutor Rebecca Williams explained that what began as a labor dispute soon evolved into something profoundly more troubling as multiple victims emerged with parallel stories spanning decades, detailing Mustaine's abuse of power within the music industry. These individuals had remained silent for years, fearing retaliation due to Mustaine's immense influence and well-established reputation for vindictive behavior toward critics. Former Megadeth guitarist Marty Friedman, who had largely remained silent about his reasons for leaving the band in 2000, provided testimony that stunned longtime followers. According to Friedman, working with Mustaine was psychological warfare. He described a stark contrast between the public Dave, who could be charming and brilliant, and the private Dave, who used people's vulnerabilities against them and seemed to derive pleasure from watching others suffer. Friedman recounted incidents that far exceeded typical band dynamics, including allegations that Mustaine would sabotage opening acts who received excessive praise from audiences by having their sound intentionally botched, equipment mysteriously damaged, or set times cut short. Friedman stated that Mustaine's pathological need to dominate everyone around him was undeniable. Perhaps the most damning testimony was delivered by former bassist David Ellefson, whose own controversial departure from Megadeth in 2021 had previously made headlines. Ellefson admitted, I spent most of my career making excuses for Dave's behavior, words that underscored the toxic environment perpetuated for years within the band, ultimately contributing to the unraveling of Mustaine's legacy. He testified that he had convinced himself for years that Mustaine's conduct was merely a result of artistic temperament or the immense pressure of maintaining the band's legacy, admitting his error and that his silence had enabled harm to others. As the investigation deepened, prosecutors uncovered evidence of more severe criminal behavior. Multiple women came forward alleging that Mustaine had used his powerful position to coerce young female fans into compromising situations backstage at Megadeth concerts throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Detective Sarah Johnson, who led the investigation, stated the pattern was consistent and calculated. Vulnerable young fans, often grappling with their own substance abuse issues, would be singled out, separated from their friends, and promised special access or industry opportunities, only to find themselves trapped in situations they could not easily escape. The prosecution presented devastating evidence, including backstage passes with specific notations, journal entries, and, perhaps most shockingly, a series of Polaroid photographs discovered in a storage locker rented under a pseudonym linked to Mustaine. Digital forensic experts testified that the photos, spanning from 1987 to 2004, depicted individuals who appeared impaired or unaware they were being photographed. Prosecutor Rebecca Williams clarified that these were not merely the excesses of typical rock star behavior but revealed a systematic pattern of identifying and exploiting vulnerable individuals, with the evidence kept as trophies. Former tour manager Ray Wilson provided further testimony about the elaborate system that facilitated and concealed Mustaine's actions. He described a code used by certain crew members, involving specific colored passes and terminology, that indicated those involved were aware of what was happening. Those of us who knew had to make a choice: stay silent or lose our livelihoods, Wilson stated. I'll have to live with the choice I made for the rest of my life. These revelations sent shock waves through the metal community, leaving many artists to grapple with the stark contrast between the musician they had admired and the predator described in court. Metallica members James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, whose complex history with Dave Mustaine is widely documented, released a joint statement expressing their horror: "We are devastated by what has come to light. While our personal and professional relationships with Dave have been complex over the decades, we never imagined the extent of the harm he was causing. Our hearts go out to all victims and we urge others with information to come forward." Kerry King of Slayer, who had toured extensively with Megadeth during the Big Four thrash metal shows, expressed his shock at a press conference. "We all knew Dave could be difficult. That was just part of his reputation. But there's a world of difference between being a difficult bandmate and being a predator. If I had known what was happening, I would have done something. That's what haunts me now." The case has prompted a broader reckoning within the metal community about behavior long normalized or dismissed as mere rock and roll excess. Several major festivals and record labels quickly announced new protocols for backstage access and reporting mechanisms for inappropriate behavior. Music industry analyst Jennifer Blake explained, "This isn't just about one person's crimes. It's forcing an entire genre to examine the culture that allowed this behavior to continue unchecked for decades. The sex, drugs, and rock and roll ethos has often provided cover for what we now recognize as serious criminal behavior." Throughout the trial, Mustaine maintained his innocence, with his defense team arguing the allegations were either fabricated by disgruntled former employees or were consensual interactions reinterpreted through a modern lens. Attorney Robert Coleman portrayed Mustaine as a scapegoat for industry-wide behavior once accepted but now condemned. Dave Mustaine is being judged by 2023 standards for behavior that was commonplace in the 1980s and 1990s music industry. He is being singled out because of his fame and his outspoken nature, while countless others who engaged in identical behavior face no consequences. The defense called several character witnesses, including musicians who had positive experiences, such as guitarist Kiko Loureiro, who joined Megadeth in 2015 and described Mustaine as demanding but fair and completely professional. Mustaine himself took the stand, cutting an imposing figure with his trademark red hair now streaked with gray. He categorically denied the most serious allegations while acknowledging his behavior had sometimes been difficult and demanding. "I've never claimed to be perfect. I've battled addiction. I've said things I regret, and I've had conflicts with bandmates. But I have never ever engaged in the kind of behavior I'm being accused of. These allegations are either misunderstandings or deliberate attempts to destroy me by people with grudges and financial motives." The jury remained unconvinced, deliberating for just 9 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all major counts. As the verdict was read, witnesses described Mustaine's expression shifting from confidence to disbelief to rage in a matter of seconds. It was like watching the different sides of him that witnesses had described all play out in real time, said courtroom reporter Michael Chen. The mask dropped completely. The sentencing hearing 3 days later was equally dramatic, with several victims delivering powerful impact statements describing how their encounters with Mustaine had devastated their lives. One woman, identified only as Jane Doe No. 3, described how her experience backstage at a 1993 concert led to years of substance abuse and trust issues. I came to see my musical hero and left with wounds that have never fully healed. I blamed myself for decades. It's only now hearing so many similar stories that I understand I was targeted and manipulated. When given the chance to speak, Mustaine remained defiant, maintaining his innocence and suggesting he was the victim of a conspiracy. I've made enemies throughout my career by speaking my mind and refusing to conform. This is the price I'm paying for that honesty. History will vindicate me even if this court won't.